record these for anybody that just we left off last week at chapter 9 in Genesis, and the reason why I'm not doing chapter 10 and 11 is because it's kind of a lot of words I can't say, a lot of names of descendants and a lot of that type of thing, and not much that I could do for our Bible study, so I'll put that in there. But if you want to go back and read those things, you'll see what I'm talking about. It doesn't mean they're not important, but they're not really about what I am talking about. So that's where I'm at with it. You want this off? Okay. There you go. Okay, so I got out today my Big Kahuna Study Bible to add some notes because Genesis has a lot of good stuff in there, but I have sometimes struggled because I'm still so new to all of this. I want to make sure that I get all the details I can for y'all. So I got this guy out, and this is the English Standard Version. So that's the one I'm reading out of today. So chapter 12, the call of Abram. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him, and Lot is his nephew. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Did I skip? Okay, here we go. My eyes were skipping. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, his nephew, and all their possessions, and they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan, or Canaan, however you want to say it. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At the time the Canaanites were in the land, then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he built there an altar, to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country of the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent. Hi, buddy. With Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, and there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going to Negev. So to back up a little bit, I put down on here, as most of us know that have read the Bible or any parts of the Bible, Abram is only Abram for a little while, and then God renames him Abraham. Abram means the Father, which is God, is exalted, which is, the highest, put high. And then Abraham means a father of many nations. Can you say hi? Yeah, see, we're on there. That was Maverick. So I wanted to reference that, so I think it's really important. And I put on there that Sarai also has her name changed eventually to Sarah. So if you've heard of Sarah and Abraham, that is who Abram and Sarai are. Okay, and then I put is a reference. It showed me in my study Bible a reference in Acts to Abram going to the land he went to, and just being told to just go by God and him going, which I think is pretty important to say that Abram has the kind of faith that I want to have, which is a strong faith that I wouldn't say a blind faith, but just all the faith in the world that God is leading him where he needs to. So in Acts chapter 7, they reference back to Abraham. It says, the God glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he lived in Haran, and said to him, go out from your land and from your kindred and go in the land that I will show you. And then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans and lived in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there into this land in which you are now living. Yet he gave him no inheritance in it. It's not, and then it's just talking, basically it goes on and on, but I thought it was interesting because in Acts, he is referencing it because of the fact that he was just told to go. Just told to pick up and leave. And he picked up. And I think it's also pretty, hold on 1 second. 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. My husband's getting him now. We thought he could stay here with us, but he cannot. Because I can't hear myself think. So basically, what I was saying is I referenced back to Acts 7 because I thought it was interesting that in a speech that the man there was saying, Stephen, he was talking about basically the fact that Abraham was just told to pick up and leave everything he knew. And he just trusted that God had a plan for him and that he was to do his plan and it was all God's anyway. Like that's his mindset, which I think is really important. So then we go to, okay, Abram and Sarai in Egypt. Now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And when he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and then they will want to kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, and it may go well with me because of you, and my life may be spared for your sake. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful, and when the princess of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house, and for her sake he dealt with her with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai. So we just want to stop there for just a second. Abram has a plan. It probably seems pretty justified because it happened exactly as he thought it would, where as soon as she said she was his sister, he was blessed by them with all this stuff. And also, they did not want to hurt him. They wanted to bless him because they were siblings. So they thought. But when we go and we try to make our own plan, it never goes the way we expect it to, because the Lord is always, I've said this before, if you have to sin, then it's not the Lord's plan. So lying that way and being so deceitful and having her, from what we can tell, be with another man so that so that he can stay alive. To me, I understand exactly in those times why that would make sense. But when you're working with the Lord, that is not how things work. So it says, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So the Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? What did you say? She is my sister. Or why did you say she is my sister so that I took her for my wife? And now, then here is your wife, take her and go. And the Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. So he still kept all the things that they gave him, which I think says a lot about God and his plan. And the fact that Pharaoh, at the very least, was like, I don't want none of this. That's how strong the Lord is. All the plagues, all the things, he's like, get it out of here. Just whatever you got to do, just go. Because the Lord is that strong. So then Abram and Lot, and remember Lot is his nephew, it says separate. So Abram went up from Egypt, and he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into Negev. Now Abram was very rich in livestock and silver and in gold, and he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord, and Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. It's a pretty good problem to have. They have a lot of stuff. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And at that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. And then Abram said to Lot, let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. It's not the whole land before you. Separate yourself from me. And if you take the left hand, then I will go right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And then it says, so Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other, and Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were wicked, great sinners against the Lord. So to start there, what did Lot do? Lot looked at this gracious man, his uncle, that was being so very kind, and decided he was going to take the better, looked better. And of course, Abram gave him that option, but it just shows you, like, when somebody is giving you something and you go and you take what is the best out of the two things, a lot of times, if we see this in the Bible, I've noticed this, God is ready to humble you. And life humbles me all the time. So when you're being very prideful, or when you are being selfish, a lot of times you're going to get it handed back to you in some sort of way. And I don't think that that is karma so much as it is God trying to teach us humility. So here we go. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land you will see, I will give to you and to your offspring forever. And I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of land, for I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar for the Lord. So the Lord is there telling him he's going to bless him with many children. And at the point, I wrote Abram leaving Ur, which is when he first left where he was originally at, was 75 years old. So he's already up there. And he follows God's plan without hesitation. And it's just like 75 years old, you hear that you're going to have so many children that it's like dust that you can't even count it. It's just, he just keeps, believing in God's plan. And I think that's really beautiful. So then it says here, Abram rescues Lot. In the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elsazar, these are going to be fun. Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, you get the point. We're just going to keep going down. 12 years they served, but in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim in, not reading any of that, on the border of the wilderness. And then they turned back and came to En-Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites, who are dwelling in Hazazon Tamar. Sure. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zobim. We'll keep going down here. Okay. Let's find this part, which is what I'm getting at. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. And then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite brother of Eshcol and of Aner. They were allies to Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them went in pursuit. So the Lord is not only facilitating so much for Abram, like you have to think that, because how he has 318 people, he has a full-blown army ready to go that was born in his house. So although at this point, Abram has no children, he has a wife, he has his nephew. These are like the people that he's been bringing with him, and they've been multiplying, and he has made his own family. And these guys are so like close to him. And obviously his family, because Lot is his nephew, that they're willing to go to war for him to help get him back. And I think that that's so incredible and just says a lot about who Abram is, honestly. And okay, so it says, and went in pursuit as far as Dan, and he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. And then he brought them back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot with the possessions and the woman and the women and the people. So that's amazing. And then after this, when they have returned, the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom, went out to meet at the valley of Shevith. And it says in parentheses, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. And it says he was a priest of the God Most High. And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed by God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything. So back then, that's Abram tithing to this priest. And then the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. I will take nothing but what the young men have eaten and share of the men who went with me. And so they got their share of like a celebration, but he didn't want to take anything from him. And I think that that's kind of cool because he knew that those people were wicked. And he didn't, it's like that reward would have been tainted. It's not what God wanted. You don't do these things to get rewarded with money. Like those things are priceless. He got his nephew back. They defeated a lot of people in the process. So I think that's pretty cool. So then God's covenant with Abram. After these years, the word of the Lord came to Abram the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I'm your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me if I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And the Lord said, this man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, look toward the heaven and the number of stars, if you are able to number them. And then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. So again, he's being told he's going to have many children, and he's getting very old. So he's still having belief, though. And I think that just shows who Abram is. He said to him, I am Lord who has brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? And he said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all these and cut them in half and laid them half over against the other, but he did not cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down to the carcasses, Abram drove them away. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. And then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation, and they will serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in good old age, and they shall come back here in fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. And when the sun had gone down, it was dark. Behold, a smoking firepot and flaming torch passed between these pieces. On the day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying to your offspring, I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river of Euphrates, and the land of Kenites and the Kenizzites, the Kadmonites and Hittites and Perizzites and Rephaim and Amorites and Canaanites and Girgashites and Jebusites. That's why I don't read them. And I have listened to my Holy Bible app read it to me, and I will hear it, and I swear even he's stumbling. So that is important to say, that God let him know of the future. God's always all-knowing, but he let him know of the future and was telling him, like, with all certainty, you will have children, but they will be persecuted. They will have a rough time. It's not going to be easy, but you will live a, full life as an old man and will die, and you will die in a good old age, but they are going to be the ones fighting. So then we go, this is the last part I'm doing today, which is chapter 16. So to wrap it up, Sarai and Hagar. So now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go in to my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan. So this man he's old. He started out at 75. Then we got to think he's in his 80s somewhere. He's not young. So let's see here. So she told him to go to their servant, and that maybe that's how they're going to have kids. And I always say in this part, the more I read it, the more I realize God has a sense of humor, and God can take anything and make it good. So that's what happens. She conceives, the servant conceives, and he saw, okay. And she saw that she had conceived. She looked with contempt on her mistress. So she was not liking Sarai. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt, and may the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please. And then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. So I wrote here that Sarai didn't think she'd ever have kids, despite what God had been saying. So she wasn't trusting in God's plan. She thought she could do things her way and help God's plan. Who don't we all? And so they could move things along quicker. And then I put, how often do we think that God isn't answering our prayers because it seems like it's been taking too long? Like this was a 10-year gap between the last time God had told him about this. 10 years is a long time to be waiting on something like that. And I think we forget that it's all God's timing sometimes, and that 10 years might seem like a long time to us, but it isn't to God. And then I said, Sarai then doesn't like the consequences of her actions and gets prideful, which made Hagar run away. And then it says here, the angel of the Lord found her by the spring of the water in the wilderness. He found Hagar on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude, meaning that she's going to have so many she can't even count. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael. because the Lord had listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God of seeing. For she said, truly, here I have seen who looks after me. Therefore the well was called Beer-lahai-roi. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whose Hagar bore, Ishmael. And Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. So we're stopping there. But the point is, like I said, 86. Who knows how old Hagar is, but 86. Abram was 86. He has his first son by someone that isn't his wife because of them trying to jumpstart God's plan here. You can't do that. It said the angel of the Lord was the one that was talking to her. I read in my study Bible and then looked it up further that people believe that the angel of the Lord who was speaking to her and that is mentioned throughout the Bible is the pre-incarnate Jesus. So that is what is believed to be the angel of the Lord. So I think that that is awesome. And because of God's covenant with Abram, he would now have two groups of immeasurable descendants. So spoiler alert, later God does fulfill the promise with Sarai, and she does have kids. That's going to be next week when we talk about that. But my point is, when I say God has a sense of humor, I just mean that God was like, okay, well, if you're going to say that you're just going to help me out with these kids thing, you're now going to have two sets of descendants that are all immeasurable because I promised you would have more than the stars. And Hagar names her son because she was told to, but also names her son Ishmael, and Ishmael means God hears. And she was talking about how God heard her in affliction, which I think is awesome. And I said, to me, this shows that God really is all-knowing. I think that he may have known from the very start that Sarai would become restless in her waiting to conceive. So in knowing that, God not only still fulfills his covenant, but proves that when we try to take the reins and control over our fate with our free will, he is still in control. He is always in control. I said, even when we don't trust him like we should, he comes through and shows us his timing is always perfect and his timing is always worth it. Because when we wait for his actual timing, it's always greater than what we came up with ourselves. It's always greater than what we did. And I always say this still to this day, that every baby is a blessing. So although he may have had relations with Hagar and a time such as this was not that uncommon, but he may have had relations with her in order to have a child. The point is, every baby is a blessing. God wanted that baby here. He wouldn't have allowed her to conceive if he didn't see the goodness, if he didn't see what could be. And as I said, spoiler alert, Sarai does get pregnant. Sarai does have kids, some very important ones in the Bible, but God knows. And I really do believe that that can be put into what we feel in our lives. How I said that I really do believe, since God is all knowing, he knew that they wouldn't be able to trust him completely. It was like he had to let them, but that's what our free will does. He had to allow them to question it. And then in turn, still, he's fulfilling his promise because he told Abram that he would have many, many kids. He never did say in the beginning that Abram would have them with Sarai, technically, although that's what you would assume he meant because they're married. So I get where Sarai's trying to like twist that a little bit. She's like, well, he said you would have kids, so let's make it happen. And that's what we often do. We see a little bit of what we feel God is telling us to do. Like, oh gosh, I always feel it's oversaid that God calls me to do this. If God is calling you to do something, then it's not going to be something that has to happen when you sin. Like, you don't have to do things to get around the calling. The pathway will be made. You will have to put effort in. There will have to be faith involved, and you will have to keep showing up, but it will never be roadblocked by God. That's how you know that it's God. He's like almost like a neon sign pointing to what he wants you to do. And it doesn't mean you don't have to ask him a few times to be sure, but like Sarai was like all of us, impatient, a little bit questioning God, not trusting him completely, just feeling like maybe she knew better. And not even just that, like it literally says like she was trying to help. Like in her head, that was going to help things along because she wasn't able. They tried, it'd been 10 years. She's like, it's not going to happen. Like, God said, you're going to have many kids. Maybe he didn't mean from me. And we question ourselves, even though we know God's plans are clear. When he tells us a plan, it is not confusing. It is usually very clear. But we distort it because we need it to be the way we want it to be. And we need it to happen when we want it to happen. And that's not how it works. And that's having faith. Because if you have faith through the times when you have to wait, or the times when something went completely different than what you had expected, or that job didn't come through, or that baby, or that marriage, or, you know, whatever it is, it's like, that wasn't God's plan. And I am a firm believer of people can use that a little bit too much, like, oh, it's God's plan, it's God's plan. It's like, it is God's plan if you don't have to mess with it. Like if you don't have to try to alter it, then it is God's plan. So the whole time he's telling them, I mean, he's having visions and literally hearing from God. So couldn't been more clear. But 10 years goes by and it's silent. You have to assume like he's not hearing from him. And he's like, whoa, you know, and I always think whenever I see the women in the Bible, I'm like, she's a fixer. I relate. I'm a fixer. She's like, we have this beautiful young Egyptian. She could have a baby. Like she can be our surrogate. Like in her head, like she's like, we can still have kids. She never gave up that dream. And it's like she didn't want to let it go. And that breaks my heart a little bit. But at the same time, every baby is a blessing. Everything that we do, we will try to move off of God's plan, and sometimes not even purposefully, but like we do it. And then God still nudges us back over. He's like, no, this is what we're doing. Like he'll let these things happen so that we can learn humility, so that we can learn from things that we need to learn from in order to be ready for the path. I always say he's preparing us for what he's prepared for us, because that it couldn't be more true. We do that for our kids. It's like we know what's coming. So like if I know my kids are going to go to the doctor and they have to get like a vaccination, I have one or two options. I can prepare them by telling them about it, or I can prepare them by not telling them. Because if you tell them, certain kids freak out and certain ones need to know. So it's all about who the person is. And I believe God knows us inside and out. And he knows what we need to know and what we don't need to know. And sometimes his plan is not obvious until it's obvious, until you get to that point and you're like, that's why nothing else ever worked. So that's just my 2 cents on how I think. Like, I never looked into this story the way I did this time because I'm studying it. I've read it, but I'm studying it. And when I read it, I was like, when I wrote, to me, it shows that God is really all-knowing, and I think he may have known from the start that that would happen because he has to. Like, he knows everything. But what I mean is he knew exactly that this would be the outcome if he made them wait. And it's like, but I'm going to show you why no matter what, I'm right. And what I say is what's going to happen. And so you think you're changing the plan, but really you're doing exactly what I thought you were going to do. And we're going to go this way with the plan. So I think he's a great father, and I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He's the same God then as he is now. I always try to remind myself of that when I struggle reading the Old Testament. Same God. So if you guys would like to pray with me, I'm going to pray and then we will be done. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for all the women that showed up today. Thank you, as always, for helping me find the words to say, to be able to connect with your word and put it with our life and be able to learn and grow in our faith, but also to learn more and more about your heart, Lord. I want to be closer to you. I know all of these women want to be closer to you. And I pray that anyone that watches this later can also find the closeness that we are finding today. In your name, I pray. Thank you, Lord. All right, you guys, thank you so much for being here. And I hope that, and Casey, this was your first time. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I appreciate everyone. My son's going nuts. I think he wants to come out here. So I'm going to finish up. But like I said, I'm staying on Genesis because I think Genesis is super important. You're welcome, Danica. I think it's super important to learn about everything so we can learn about God fully. And so as much as I was skipping around before, something in me is saying, keep going on this Genesis track. So we're going to keep going and we're going to keep getting some good stuff out of it. I have no doubt. So I hope you guys have a great week. Also, it's about to cut me off, I think, but I think I'm going to try to do, I'm glad you joined too, Casey, of course. I think I'm going to try to do it Wednesday next week, or I might do a poll and ask what people think Wednesday or Friday. And normally Wednesday, because Fridays people are busy usually, but I know Thanksgiving is Thursday, so I don't want to try to do it next week. We'll just change the day and see who can show up. But I love you guys. Thank you for coming, and I will see you later.